My name is Della Hartwell, and I was 33 years old the day I learned exactly how loud a quiet door can be. I was on my hands and knees on the bathroom floor of our house in Columbus, Ohio, gripping the edge of the bathtub so hard my knuckles had gone white, when I heard the front door click shut. Not slam, click. Soft and careless, the way you close a door when you are not leaving someone behind, just stepping out for milk. A contraction was tearing through my lower back at that exact moment, the kind that folds you in half and steals your voice, and I remember thinking the timing could not be real. My husband could not actually be walking out the door while I was 41 weeks pregnant and 3 minutes between contractions. But he was. His name was Garrett Voss, and 10 minutes earlier he had stood in that bathroom doorway with his car keys already in his hand, watching me breathe through the pain like he was waiting for a commercial to end. I had looked up at him and said the only word my body would let me say, hospital. And Garrett, my husband, the man who cried at our wedding, had glanced at his phone, then back at me and said, "It's just a baby, Della. Babies take hours. Dad's got the game on. I'll meet you there before anything actually happens. It's just a baby." I want you to remember that sentence, because I have replayed it 10,000 times since, and it still lands like a slap. Have you ever heard a door close and known, somewhere underneath your skin, that something you thought was solid had just quietly ended? If you have, you already understand the silence I am about to describe. For a few seconds after the door clicked, I did not move. I knelt there on the cold tile, listening to his car back out of the driveway, the engine fading down our street toward his father's house, where there was a big screen, cold beer, and a playoff game that mattered more than the birth of his first child. I told myself he was nervous. I told myself men handle fear badly. I told myself 100 kind things, because telling myself kind things about Garrett was a skill I had spent 6 years perfecting. Let me back up, because the door closing was not the beginning. It was just the part that finally made the pattern impossible to ignore. Garrett and I met when I was 26. I worked then, and still work now, as a labor and delivery scheduling coordinator at a hospital. My whole job is making sure other women's deliveries go smoothly, that the right room is ready, that the right nurse is on, that no laboring mother is left waiting in a hallway. The irony of that is not lost on me. I spent my days protecting other people's most vulnerable hours, and somehow I had built a marriage where mine did not count. Garrett was charming in the way that works on a tired woman. He noticed things, he made jokes, he called his mother every Sunday, and I mistook that for warmth instead of dependence. His father, Royce Voss, was a loud, backslapping man who had raised Garrett on one simple philosophy, repeated so often it had become family scripture: men provide, women handle. Royce said it at barbecues. He said it at Thanksgiving. He had said it the night I announced I was pregnant, lifting his beer toward Garrett and saying, "Your real job starts now, son." Hers too. And everyone had laughed, and I had laughed, because that is what you do when you are still trying to belong. What I did not understand for a long time was that in the Voss family, my needs were always negotiable, and Garrett's comfort never was. When my car broke down, Garrett was at a tailgate and told me to call a tow truck. When I had pneumonia the second winter we were married, he went to a fantasy football draft, and his mother, Bonnie, dropped off soup and a comment about how I needed to build up my immune system. When my own father passed away the year before I got pregnant, Garrett left the funeral reception early because Royce wanted to catch the second half of a college game, and I stood in a borrowed black dress saying goodbye to mourners alone. Each time, I made it small. I told myself it was one bad day. I became very good at shrinking the size of my own hurt so it would fit in a space nobody had to look at. The old Della believed that if she just needed less, she would finally be loved enough. So when the door clicked that night, the old Della was still in charge for about 4 minutes. I got myself up off the floor. I called Garrett. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted him. "My water broke 20 minutes ago. Contractions are close. I need you to come back." And I waited, leaning against the wall, watching 3 dots appear and disappear and appear again. His reply came, "Can your sister take you? It's tied in the 4th. I'll be right behind you, promise. My sister lives in Arizona. That was the moment something in my chest went very still. Not calm, still. The way a room goes still, right before something falls. I did not call him a third time. Instead, I called Imani Cole, my coworker, my friend, the one person who had worked the floor as a labor and delivery nurse for 15 years before she moved into scheduling with me. She answered on the first ring, and the second she heard my breathing, she did not waste a word. I am coming. Do not call him again. Unlock the front door and sit down. I will be there in 9 minutes. She made it in 7. I want to tell you about the drive, because that is where the first crack in the old Della appeared. Imani drove the way she did everything, steady and unbothered, one hand on the wheel and one hand reaching over to grip mine through each contraction. She did not fill the silence with panic. At one point, somewhere on the highway with the city lights smearing past the window, she said something quietly, almost to herself, that I have never forgotten. You know what I learned in 15 years on that floor, Della? You can tell everything about a man by where he is when she's in pain, not when she's glowing in the photos, when she's in pain. I did not answer her, I was too busy breathing. But that sentence slid into me and lodged somewhere deep, and it would not leave. We got to the hospital, my hospital, the one where everyone knew my name. The night charge nurse took one look at me and at the empty space where a husband should have been, and her face did a thing I will remember forever. It softened, and then it hardened, all in 1 second, on my behalf. They got me into a room. They checked me. I was already at 8 centimeters. There had never been hours. Garrett had gambled my labor on a lie he told himself so he would not have to leave a couch. My phone kept lighting up on the little tray table beside the bed. I thought, for one foolish breath, that it was him coming to his senses. I asked Imani to read it to me. She picked it up, her jaw tightened. And here is the part that broke me, the part that was so much worse than the closing door. It was not one message asking if I was okay. It was a string of texts about the game. Refs are blind, LOL. Dad says hi. We pulled ahead. Momentum's ours. Then, finally, almost as an afterthought, how's it going over there? How's it going over there? Like I was at a dentist appointment. I gave birth to my daughter that night, with my friend's hand in mine and a charge nurse crying quietly in the corner, and not one member of the Voss family in the building. When they laid her on my chest, this tiny, furious red person with a full head of dark hair, every other sound in the world disappeared. I named her Marigold, Mari. I had wanted a flower name since I was a little girl, and Garrett had always vetoed it as too soft. I did not ask him. I named her myself, and in that moment of naming her alone, I understood that some decisions I would never share with him again. If your phone had lit up at the most important moment of your life, and it was not even a real question about your child, just a score update, tell me honestly, would you have answered it? I did not. I turned to the phone face down. But the next morning, the old Della tried to come back one more time. She always does. That is the part nobody tells you about leaving. It does not happen in one clean motion. It happens in a war between the woman you were trained to be and the woman the pain is forcing you to become. The war started at 9 that morning, when Bonnie Voss arrived. Not Garrett, his mother. She swept into the recovery room in a cloud of perfume, holding a balloon, and before she even looked at her granddaughter, she looked at me and said, "Della, sweetheart, you really put on a show last night." Garrett is humiliated. You couldn't have just called him calmly. You made him feel like a criminal in front of his father. And here is the shameful truth. For about 30 seconds, it worked. I felt my face go hot with guilt. I started to apologize. I started to explain that I had called, that I had texted, that I had needed him. The words, "I'm sorry it got so dramatic," were actually forming in my throat, because that throat had been trained for 6 years to make the Voss family comfortable. Then Marigold made a small sound in the bassinet beside me. A tiny, brand-new, hungry sound. And I looked at her, and I looked at this woman scolding me for the crime of going into labor, and something inside me that had been bending for 6 years finally, quietly, snapped into a different shape. I did not yell. That is important. The old Della would have cried. The new Della, the one who was about 8 hours old, just said, "Bonnie, I'd like you to leave the room now." She blinked at me, like I had spoken in another language. I said it again, the same calm I use on the phone at work, when a delivery is going sideways and panic helps no one. Please leave. Visiting my daughter is something you do with respect, or not at all. She left to go call Garrett and tell him I had lost my mind. Let her. Because somewhere between that door clicking shut and Bonnie's perfume filling that room, I had stopped trying to be loved by people who only loved my obedience. I saw it then, all of it, laid out like a chart. This was not one bad night. This was a pattern, and the pattern had a shape, and the shape was that I always paid and they never did. That was the day I stopped explaining and started keeping records. It sounds cold, and maybe it was, but cold was exactly what I needed. I called my cousin Wade that afternoon from the hospital bed while Mari slept on my chest. Wade and I had drifted over the years, mostly because the Voss family found him negative, which was their word for anyone who asked questions. Wade was a paralegal, calm, dry, precise. When I told him what had happened, he was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "Della, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not feel weird about it. Save everything, every text, screenshot the timestamps, ask the hospital for your admission time documentation. Don't delete a single thing, even the cruel parts. Especially the cruel parts." I almost deleted that string of game texts that morning out of pure heartbreak. I am so glad I did not, because when I sat in that hospital bed and screenshotted them, lining up the timestamps against my official admission time and Mari's time of birth, I saw the whole truth in one neat, undeniable column. While I was at 8 centimeters, he was texting "Momentum's ours." 40 minutes before our daughter was born, he sent a thumbs up to a photo of nachos. The truth did not need me to scream. It just needed me to keep the receipts. Then Wade said the thing that changed the whole game. "Della, the house, whose name is on the deed?" Mine, only mine. I had bought that little house 2 years before I ever met Garrett, with money I saved working doubles and skipping vacations. When we married, we always meant to add his name, and we always forgot, because adding his name was a task that benefited me and therefore never quite made it to the top of anyone's list. Garrett paid no part of that mortgage. He had his own money, and he kept it for guy stuff, as Royce called it, and I had quietly carried the house the entire marriage because that was just how it worked in the Voss world. I paid, they handled. For the first time, that arrangement was about to work in my favor. I want to be clear about something, because this is where people expect the story to turn into a fantasy. I am not a secret millionaire. I am not a lawyer. I had no master plan and no hidden power. The only thing I had was the truth, written down, and a house that was legally, entirely mine. Stay with me, because the morning Garrett finally came home, he had absolutely no idea what was waiting for him on the porch. I stayed in the hospital one more day, and Garrett did not visit. He sent one text: "We need to talk when you get home. My family is really hurt by how you handled this." His family was hurt. I read that text 3 times, and the third time I almost laughed because the audacity of it was almost a kind of art. When I was discharged, Imani drove me and Mari to her own house instead of mine. I needed 2 days and a clear head and Wade on the phone before I went back. In those 2 days, I did 3 things. First, I called a locksmith and arranged for him to meet me at my house on a specific morning. Second, I went to my bank, the same one that held the mortgage in my name alone, and I separated my accounts because Garrett had a card on my checking account that he used for household things, which mostly meant tailgate supplies and a subscription to a sports package I had never once watched. Third, with Wade's help, I had a family law attorney draft a clear, calm letter outlining a separation, primary custody, and the fact that the marital home was my separate property predating the marriage. No screaming, no accusations, just documents. Just blue ink on white paper, which I have come to believe is the loudest sound a quiet woman can make. The morning I went home, the locksmith met me at 8, By 8:40, every lock on my house had a new key, and Garrett's old key opened nothing. I sat on the couch with Mari asleep on my chest and a folder on the coffee table, and I waited, because Wade had advised me to be present and calm when Garrett discovered the change, with the doorbell camera recording the entire time. He came at 11. I watched on my phone as he walked up to the door, still in his jersey from 2 days of celebrating, and tried his key. It did not turn. He tried it again, harder, jiggling it, his confidence visibly cracking on the little screen. Then he started knocking, then pounding, calling my name in that warm, reasonable voice he used when he wanted something. Della, Della, come on. This is ridiculous. Let me in. This is my house. I opened the door, but did not step aside. Behind him, his father's truck was idling at the curb. Of course Royce had come too. They never did anything alone. This is my house, Garrett, I said quietly. It has always been my house. Your name was never on it. You'd know that if you'd ever once carried it. His face went through several things at once. Confusion, then anger, then the calculating look I knew so well, the one that meant he was searching for the angle that made him the victim. You're keeping me from my daughter. You're going to look insane, Della. The whole family already thinks you've snapped. I handed him the folder. Everything you need is in here. Communication goes through my attorney. You can see Marigold, supervised at first, on a schedule we arrange properly. I am not keeping you from your daughter. I'm keeping you from doing to her what you did to me. That was when Royce got out of the truck and came stomping up the walk, red-faced, ready to backslap the situation into submission like he always had. Now listen here, Della. A man's gotta have his life. You don't punish a man for watching a ball game. In my day, women didn't make this kind of scene. And here is where Garrett's overreach finished him, because he did the thing entitled, "Men always do when they think they're still in charge." He pulled out his phone, smug, and said, "I've got texts proving you were fine. You told me it would take hours. This is all on you." He started scrolling to find his own messages, the ones he thought made his case. He did not understand that he was about to read them out loud on a recording, on the porch of a house that was not his, with his father standing beside him as a witness. He read, "See, you said hospital. I said babies take hours." Then his own next line, in his own voice, came out of his mouth. "It's just a baby." He heard it land in the open air. I watched it happen on his face. The same words that had felt so reasonable to him on the couch sounded, out loud, in daylight, like exactly what they were. I did not argue. I did not have to. I simply said, "Thank you for confirming that." The camera got it too, and his mouth closed. The truth about what came next is that it was not loud, and it was not a single dramatic explosion. It was a slow unraveling, and every thread of it was one Garrett pulled himself. He tried, in the weeks that followed, to control the story the way the Voss family always controlled stories. He told relatives I had locked him out of his own home over nothing, but this time, when an aunt called to scold me, I did not defend myself in 3 paragraphs the way the old Della would have. I sent one message to the family group chat. I will not discuss the details publicly. I went into active labor. I called and texted my husband repeatedly. He chose to stay at a playoff game and told me, quote, "It's just a baby. I have the timestamps. I'm focused on my daughter now." Then I attached nothing else and said nothing more. Silence did what pleading never could. People started doing math. They compared the time of Mari's birth to the time of the game. A cousin who had been at Royce's house that night, watching the same game, quietly told another cousin that yes, Garrett had been there the whole time, laughing, and that someone had even joked about him, dodging the delivery. That comment traveled. It always does. Within 2 weeks, the story the Voss family had built collapsed under the weight of its own witnesses, because the one thing they had never planned for was that the obedient one would simply stop lying for them. Bonnie called, furious, then tearful, then furious again. Royce told his golf friends I was vindictive, until one of them, a man whose own daughter had given birth that same year, looked at him and said, "Royce, he left her in labor. What is wrong with you people? And Royce, for the first time in his backslapping life, did not have a comeback. Garrett lost more than he ever expected to. Not because I destroyed him, but because I stopped being the thing that held him up. He had to move back in with his parents, into the same house with the same big screen and the same scripture about men providing and women handling, except now there was no woman handling. He had to learn, through a court-ordered parenting schedule and a co-parenting app that logged every message, that access to his daughter was something he earned with consistency, not something he was owed by blood. The first few months, he missed visits when they conflicted with games. The app recorded each one. Every excuse became another entry. He kept building the case against himself one missed Sunday at a time, and I never had to say a word. The divorce was clean, because the documents were clean, because I had stopped explaining and started keeping records on the very first morning. The house stayed mine. My accounts stayed mine. Marigold stayed mine, with a careful, supervised, gradually expanding window for a father who would have to prove he could be one. I will not pretend it did not cost me anything. There were nights, those first months, when I sat on the floor of Mari's nursery at 3 a.m, exhausted, terrified, grieving not the man Garrett was, but the husband I had pretended he might become. I went to counseling. I learned that the guilt I kept feeling was not a sign I had done something wrong. It was just the muscle memory of a woman who had been trained to apologize for needing things. That muscle takes a long time to relax. But it does relax. A year later, I sat on the front steps of my house, with Marigold on my lap, both of us watching the sun go down over a quiet street. Imani was inside making dinner because she had become the kind of family you choose. Wade called every Sunday now, just to check in, the way family is supposed to. Mari had Garrett's dark hair, and, I am told, my stubborn chin. She will grow up knowing her father, on terms that keep her safe, and she will grow up watching a mother who learned, a little too late but not too late, that love which disappears the moment you need it most was never really love at all. It was just convenience wearing a wedding ring. The door that clicked shut that night took something from me, but it also closed off a room I had been trapped in for 6 years without knowing it, and on the other side of it was a life that was finally, completely my own. So let me ask you, the way I have asked myself 1,000 times, if you were the one on that bathroom floor, hearing the door click shut while you were in labor, hearing the words, "It's just a baby," as he walked away, what would you have done? Would you have apologized to keep the peace, the way I almost did? Or would you have changed the locks? Tell me. I really want to know. This story is a work of fiction, created for emotional storytelling and entertainment, but the lesson inside it is real. The way people treat you in your most vulnerable moment is the truest thing they will ever tell you about who they are.